Like, he was doing things that were just badass.
That was one of the coolest moments of my life.
I was really scared, but knowing that Dan had the gun, I did have the rifle, like, we would be okay.
All right, guys, welcome to today's show. And on the show with me today, I've got Zachary Smith. And Zach's a guy that reached out on social media about being on the show, but he is an avid outdoorsman, loves to fish, and he's been doing it for a lot of years. I mean, longer than, or earlier than I started. So Zach, welcome to the show.
All right, thanks, man. Nice to be here.
Why don't you start off by just sharing a little bit about yourself with the listeners, kind of how you got into the outdoors, and then what you enjoy about it now.
All right. So, yeah, like we were talking about, I'm 25. I grew up here. I've grown up here in the state of Texas. I've only ever lived outside of Texas one time. I started hunting and fishing at a very young age. Like I said, I think I killed my first year at 4 years old. My love of the outdoors really truly started after my parents got divorced, and I got to spend a lot more time outdoors with my father. And every day after work and after school, we were going fishing, and during deer season on the weekends, we were hunting every weekend, sometimes even after school and work. And I've always been a huge outdoorsman. When I was in high school, my stepdad and I started our own guide service, doing guided duck hunts, goose hunts, and fishing trips down in South Texas on the coast there. And then after I graduated, I spent a lot of time fishing with a lot of good friends, and I spent most of my time was dedicated to duck hunting. Actually, I don't think I deer hunted for probably 4 years. And then I finally got a chance to come back home and got settled back in. I started deer hunting avidly. I got a really nice 10 point this past year.
Nice.
And I hunted all season long, and it was the only deer I got. But really, I got laid off last year from Slumberjay, and that was when I really started focusing on fishing. I mean, I went out, and I think I hadn't had a fishing pole in 2 years, and I went out and spent probably $500 at Academy and Bass Pro Shops and got the perfect setup. And I've spent every waking minute I have available over the last year and a half, I've been fishing.
That's awesome. Yeah, fishing's something
that's
I feel like I really get into fishing during the summer, like when all the hunting stuff isn't going on. And then I almost completely forget about it as soon as, dove hunting, waterfowl, deer hunting, all those seasons open up. Then I'm like, I'll go months without having a fishing rod in my hands.
Yeah. I last year, after I bought my fishing rod, when duck season and deer season started, I got the fishing rod holder in the house, and I come in from work one day, and I was like, man, I haven't been fishing in probably 6 months. Let's go fishing, A lot of times when I go duck hunting with my stepdad, because I don't have a boat, but he does, we'll do a casting blast, and we'll duck hunt in the morning, and on the way back in, we'll troll and fish the whole lake until we get back to the dock.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, the whole cast and blast thing was a new thing to me moving down here to Missouri. All my buddies, I mean, if we go out like on an overnight trip, almost every time someone's bringing a fishing pole also. But we like to go to public land and do some waterfowl hunting on like big lakes. And a lot of those lakes are really well known for catfishing, some of them for bass fishing. There's even a couple lakes around here that I guess have muskie in them, but I've never caught a muskie in Missouri.
Yeah. So actually, when I was up there in Missouri doing my CDL school, when I was fishing Lake Springfield, we ended up going to a different spot that was a little bit closer to actual Springfield. And this guy caught, I think it was called a paddlefish. I don't know what it is, but I mean, its snout was about this long and about that wide. And he was about 7 foot long in total. And I've never seen that fish before. It looked like a giant shark that was freshwater almost.
Yeah. Like a spoonbill?
Almost, but it was just like it got way oversized or something. I don't know.
That's crazy. Yeah, I know a ton of people catch fish up here that are like prehistoric like that. I mean, they look straight out of a dinosaur movie.
Yeah, see, where we were fishing at, and it was, I don't know if you've ever heard of that app fish frame. I use that to my advantage a lot of times, especially if I'm in an area that I don't know and I want to find a good fish to hunt. And when we left the dam, we were fishing on the relief side of the dam, and because there's plenty of water in there. And when we left, we'd been gone about an hour, and I was just looking at the app trying to find something, and he had logged that catch literally 20 minutes after we left. I watched him walk in as I was walking down. I was like, man, come on.
Dang. Yeah, that'd be a haul. I've never caught a fish close to that. I think the biggest fish I've ever caught is probably like 40 inches, but I can't imagine a 7-foot fish.
The biggest one I've got right now under my belt was a 4.5-foot alligator gar. And that one, I actually caught him by accident because at the time when I went to CDO school, I was living in Texarkana, and we fished. I used to fish the dam at Wright Patman all the time. And over there, if you take a silver spoon with a treble hook and you stand on the relief side of the dam, there's constantly water coming out of that lake. And I mean, it's coming out pretty fast. So if you stand up close to the dam and you cast out and you reel against the water, that silver spoon, there's a lot of sand bass and stuff in there. And I don't know how I managed to do it, but I hooked the gar right on the top of his back, and the hook got stuck in his exoskeleton, and he couldn't get off. And I don't know how I didn't bust my line, but I managed to get him out.
Jeez, that's crazy.
Crazy.
I want to bow fish for alligator gar like that. Watching guys do that seems like so much fun.
That's one thing I've never mastered.
Yeah, we've bow fished for carp and stuff before, but I see needle nose gar a ton here, especially like when we go floating in Arkansas. We'll get up and we like to cliff jump on the Buffalo River. Like we'll climb up on these cliffs at different heights. But in the summer, after like if it had just rained for several days, you let the water go down and it just turns like bluish green, but like gorgeous. I mean, like picturesque. And you can see all the way to the bottom, and you'll see like 4 or 5 foot needle nose gar all just like stacked sideways on the bottom of the river. And I thought, man, even like a Hawaiian sling spear or something like that, going down with goggles, it'd be so much fun.
Yeah. So I'm sure you've probably been to the Bass Pro Shops there in Springfield. That big alligator gar that they have in there that they call it world record. I have to disagree with that one, because a guy that I used to work with at Schlumberger before we got laid off in the San Antonio River, right like 10 miles from where I was living at the time in Kennedy, about an hour south of San Antonio. He caught off of just a rod and reel. He uses offshore rods. So that's all he fishes for is alligator gar. He caught a 12.5-foot alligator gar in the river there.
Holy cow. Yeah, I think a lot of the world records that they have, it's like it's a world record because they actually called it in or documented it. Yeah. I personally know guys that have shot mule deer out in Colorado, and they'll shoot like 200 plus inch mule deer, and they could get entered. They could get entered in like the Boone and Crockett book or the Pope and Young book or whatever, but they're like, I don't even care. I don't need my name in that. I don't need people knowing that I'm shooting deer this big. And so they won't do it. And so I think there's probably a lot of world records that wouldn't stand if like the actual world record guys had recorded it.
Somebody actually reported what they got. About 5 years ago, the company that my stepdad worked for, every year at Christmas, they give them a cash bonus, and then they pay for them. They tell them, pick a place you want to go hunting, and they pay for everything, all the way down to fuel and food. And so I think it was 5 or 6 years ago, maybe. It was up here in Rock Springs up by Junction, which is about 30 miles north of where I'm sitting, or west of where I'm sitting at right now. And he had a bighorn ram, and he killed this thing at 60 yards with a 44 Magnum with a scope on it.
Jeez.
It was a Taurus Raging Bull 44 mag, the big pistol, and put the nice Leopold scope on it. And he went up there just to kill one. And he ended up, the people that he was hunting with, that got paid for it, they entered it all and all the information for him. He ended up getting a silver medal in the world record book with it.
Holy cow. That's so cool. So those are all desert bighorns down there, right?
Yeah, it's a mixture, because like in Rock Springs, like where I'm sitting at right now, like I showed you a minute ago, this is what we call the Texas Hill Country. It's like it's our version of the mountains. It's a mixture of the hill country and the desert, because you got trees and you got grass, but if you get past the grass, all it is sand and rock down there. And so those bighorn rams, they tend to flourish out here. And that's where I'm sitting at right now is prime spot here in Texas for fallow, axis, mule deer. This is where they all hang out at right here.
Yeah. See, I feel like a lot of people look at Texas and all they think of is like high fence hunting. But Texas has so much to offer, and they have, there is a lot of land that you can just get out and hunt in different, I mean, like you're talking about the hill country, but then also like desert mountainy stuff.
Yep.
I want to get down there so bad.
You got the desert out in West Texas. You hit East Texas. You hit pine trees with big hills. You hit South Texas. You got sand and weestash trees, but you got monster deer down in South Texas. I mean, not that good this year. I think he scored 127 is what he was, which is a little on the smaller side. But my senior year in high school, I was hunting my uncle's high fence ranch that he used to have in George West, which is about 60 miles outside of Corpus Christi. And I shot an 8-point, 2.5-year-old cold buck is what they considered him. And this 8-point, his G2s were, one of them was 12.5 inches long, the other one was 13 inches long. And he scored a total of like 152, which is
as a 2.5-year-old.
Yeah, that's a pretty good size. And that was straight corn fed. They don't feed protein out there.
Yeah, man, it's so wild, like seeing the deer out there. And I know, I mean, everybody's got their own opinion about high fence hunting. I went down to my buddy's ranch, or his grandpa's ranch in Texas, and he's got like 4,500 acres. And it's really odd because he has all the exotic animals out there as well. You know, I mean, you'll see a red stag walking through, and like black buck and Kim's buck and axis deer and fallow and you name it. That apparently in that area, they do like an auction, an exotic animal auction, like once or twice a month. And you can just go and buy, like you could go buy an elk if you wanted and release it on your property.
Yeah. In that area, I think I know exactly what you're talking about now. In the Mason, Fredericksburg, Poughkeepsie area, red stag actually roam free out there. Apparently, I think 20 or 30 years ago, there was a very, very wealthy rancher out there. He got sick or something. He was going to end up losing his ranch. Well, he didn't want the people from the bank to get a hold of all these exotics and, you know, just kill them all off. So what he did is he went out there and he cut his fence open. He let everything free.
Oh my gosh.
He had everything from zebras to wildebeest out there. It was insane what kind of things are roaming out there.
That's wild. I mean, I've heard of other people doing that. There was a big news story up in Ohio. Well, it ended up being a nationwide news story, but it was several years ago. This guy up in Ohio had a big cat sanctuary, and the bank was going to take it all over. And what he did is he cut the fence and he let all these animals go. And people were driving down the interstate, and they'd have like a 400-pound African lion run across the interstate on them. And so then like conservation was out there tranquilizing and just having to shoot these animals all over that were just roaming free now. Yeah,
there's an African lion, a male, that's for probably the last 4 or 5 years, way down in South Texas, like way down in the valley, close to the border, down in the Carrizo Springs, Laredo area. And somebody put it on Facebook. I was in an oil field group. That's what I've always done. And this guy took a picture of the paw print. I mean, the African lion's paw print was like this. And he set up a game camera just on the side of the lease road there. And within days had numerous pictures of this massive African lion. And it turns out nobody knows where he came from. He just ended up with this guy's, the owner, the property owner's lease there. And he gave, I was working on that lease at the time. And he came out to that location we were on. He gave all the information. He said, "You bring your gun. So you want to kill it, go ahead." And
oh my gosh.
As far as I know, he's still roaming around. I don't think anyone else has ever actually seen him in person. We've only ever caught him on camera.
That's wild. Just imagine being out somewhere, and I don't know how, tame or aggressive it was, how long it had been raised by humans or what, but I can't imagine being out in the wild and all of a sudden there's a lion staring you down, or a tiger, or really any of this stuff. Imagine
being in a ground blind and seeing that come across me. Hold on.
Yeah. Man, I would shoot, shovel, and shut up. I'd get a couple pictures that I would immediately save onto my computer so that they weren't on my phone. But gosh, man,
that's the wonderful thing about Texas is anything that's not native to this area, you don't have to have, the only thing you have to have is a hunting license. You don't have to have any special tags. You can hunt year round. It's insane. I love it out here.
That's so wild. Yeah, I know. I was asking my buddy, I was like, what would it cost for me to go down to your grandpa's ranch and, shoot one of these red stag or something like that? Because I want to try the meat. 2, I've thought about going. Is it? I figured it's probably insane, but I wanted to go out to not New Mexico, but New Zealand. I wanted to go out there and hunt so bad. And then I found out that all of those stags are like farm raised stags, like those trophy ones that you see. They're like, if you go and shoot a wild stag out there, you know, it's nothing like what you're seeing on social media and stuff. And so I was like, well, shoot,
those
I'm not going to pay
always
70.
posting the pictures, the ones you see on the TV, they're always the massive ones because they're all farm raised animals. You know?
Yeah. I'm like, man, I'm not going to pay $70,000 to go and hunt a red stag in New Zealand. Plus I've still got airfare and all that stuff. I could just go down to Texas. And I asked him, I said, you know, how much is a license for something like that? He's like, well, you don't really need a license for it. Yeah. He's like, it's not like you go and get a deer license. You have to just get like a general hunting license or something like that. And then it's whatever my grandpa wants to charge you to hunt.
Yeah. So compared to y'all's hunting license, I know I've seen your fishing license. And when I got the fishing license there, when I was there, I just gave me a piece of paper at Academy. But this is what our hunting licenses look like here in Texas. They're all it's like laminated, and it's got all your tags, and you've got to cut it off. And they got a property log right here where you have to put your property name, the county name, and what day you killed the animal. And then when you tear the tag off, you have to write the county and the name of the ranch as well. And then it's got I don't know if you can see it, but you see these little triangles right here?
Oh, yeah, you have to notch them out.
You have to notch it out to the date and whatnot. And honestly, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen it. Texas Game Wardens actually have their own TV show. It's called Lone Star Law. Yep. And you can learn a lot. You can learn a lot about the state of Texas from that show, but they take that stuff very seriously. And if you don't notch out the date, or even if you put your tag on and you fill out the property name, and say you write it with a pen or you write it with a Sharpie and it gets smeared off, you can get a citation down here for not having it clearly printed on there.
Man, that's nuts. Yeah, I always try to be really aware of what the laws are wherever I'm hunting. Even in Alaska, when I went up there, that was a whole different level. I mean, I had to look up, like in Missouri, say you shoot a deer, you can't just let it sit out there and waste. You have to make an effort to get the meat. But in Alaska, they list it all out. It's like you have to take the neck meat and the rib meat and the back straps and the quarters and all this stuff. I mean, you really can't leave much on the animal at all, which, I mean, I try to take all the meat off anyway. I don't want anything sitting out there wasting, but like rib meat. The only
thing I don't use off of a deer is rib meat. Yeah.
Yeah. Like the rib meat on a black-tailed deer in Alaska is almost nothing. You can make a couple fajitas with it. Like that's about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you're required by law to take it. And so, but up there, like they didn't even give me a slip of paper. I went in and you pay for a metal tag. So it's like an actual metal tag, almost like something you'd put on the back of a trailer, just a lock tag that's got a certain number and it's tamper proof. And so they give you a metal tag. So I had to pay like $350 for a black-tailed deer metal tag. And then as soon as I shot it, before I transported it or moved it or whatever, I had to clip that to the head.
Right. That's crazy. Yeah, the only thing we have down here, and it's a really fine line you have to walk, because if you, like 9 times out of 10, our lease that I hunt on with my dad, we have 52 acres that we hunt. That the guy that owns the property has been letting us hunt there for free for the last 15 years under one condition, that we don't shoot his dove. And so we leave his dove alone and we go out there and hunt. And it's about a 25-minute drive from there to my dad's house, which is where we do all our things. So we just put the tag on the deer, and then you have to, we take it back to the house. But see, like if I say you came down here and I gave you meat from a deer that I shot, I can keep the antlers, but you have to take that tag and put it with the meat, and you have to have that when you're traveling across Texas.
Okay. Yeah, I know, like in Colorado, we always do written stuff because one guy, when we elk hunt, he'll have like a huge cooler. Like you could fit 4 or 5 of the big Yeti coolers inside of this one. And I can't remember. I think it's called like a Grizzly or something like that. But
yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
We'll put all the meat inside that, but because we don't have the meat with us, like we're pulling a trailer with all the side-by-sides on it or something, we have to document that we like temporarily gave it to him to transport. And so he brings a paper with everybody who has meat in his cooler. They've all signed it and written a statement saying that he's got it to transport, that type of deal.
I don't know if we have that kind of thing in Texas, but I'm sure, if we had to do something like that, we could probably do that. And I'm almost certain the game would be okay with it, because if we're traveling in pack, but you get pulled over, but I get to go ahead, or if I choose to stop ahead and he has questions or she has questions, they can just, ask us, and we have that paper to show. But I've never had to come across that, because I either field dress it in the field and, go ahead and clean it right there, or I take it back to the house and do it.
Yeah. Well, then, like, the other thing about Colorado is you have to have proof of sex on the animal. And so basically when we skin out the animal and cut the quarters off, we'll actually have to leave like the balls from the bull attached to one of the quarters. And then we put that in a game bag. And then on the top of the game bag, we'll actually put the tag for the animal on that. If you don't do it that way, you have to keep it whole. You have to have the antlers attached to the body with all the meat on it. And so I'm like, yep, we can just leave the balls attached. That's much better than trying to drag an entire elk out of the backwoods.
Yeah, I can't imagine, especially if you're 10, 15 miles in, you're about foot. That's a lot of work. Oh, yeah. You're talking about a 1,500 pound animal.
Yeah. I mean, we get back to some of these spots, and, we typically put on about 45 minutes on the four-wheeler from our base, or from our camp. We'll go about 45 minutes on a four-wheeler. And then from there, we're getting off and hiking anywhere from 2 to 6 miles in. And so it's like, not only would you have to drag the entire elk all the way back to the four-wheeler, then you have to load a full elk on the four-wheeler. And we haven't used it yet, but one of the guys brings a spool. I mean, it's a spool like this big of a tether that's like a 1/4 mile long. I mean, once you run it all out. And so he's like, man, I've always wanted to hook it up to the winch. Like, say we shoot one down the mountain, like hook it up to the winch on the four-wheeler and just drag the whole thing up. But we've never had one in a situation where we could have done that anyway. So.
Yeah, not only do you have to drag it from the four-wheeler, then you have to hope the four-wheeler suspension can handle that much weight.
Oh, no kidding. Yeah, I'm like, you really have to have a trailer attached to the four-wheeler, even the side-by-sides. I mean, we get those things loaded down. Like my first year out there hunting, they shot 2 cows and a bull out of one group. And I'm like, you have to put all of that. I mean, we had like 3 four-wheelers and a side-by-side, but then you have everybody's guns, all the people, all of their gear, and then all the meat from 3 animals. And it's like, even with all the four-wheelers and side-by-sides, we were loaded down.
Oh, I can only imagine. I know a lot of people out there that I've talked to. I've been doing a lot of research, because I plan on either maybe this year or next year going up there and doing a bear hunt. And a lot of the people I talked to are telling me that they got those, it's like a game sled or whatever. It's usually, people usually use it for decoys when they go waterfowl hunting, and it floats, but they get really big ones that have wheels on them. And that's what they'll use to drag behind the four-wheeler with. That, so they can save space.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Bear hunting out in Colorado, especially right now, it's so cheap. I think it's only $100 tag now for non-residents out there.
Yeah, when I looked at it a couple of weeks ago, I think it was like $150 for a non-resident tag. And I was like, I can go spend $1,000 for fuel, food, and gear and ammo and a tag and go by myself versus spending $10,000 to go on a hunt with somebody.
Oh yeah, the big thing about that, again, just check the regulations and stuff, but I believe with bear you have to check them in at a station afterwards. And they do like that's what it said. Yeah, they do like age surveys and stuff on them, and you'll have to see what all meat and hide you have to bring back. But I mean, they're very specific, especially when it comes to bear, moose, mountain goat, and bighorn. Like, everything is very specific on those animals. And elk and stuff, I mean, you can shoot it and you can register it or whatever, but it's not like you have to take it to an actual check station.
Right. So I've never actually seen a moose. Are they as big as everybody tells me they are?
Moose?
Yeah, I've never gotten to see one.
Imagine a Clydesdale with antlers.
Oh hell!
I mean, I'm for real. We were out there on a scouting trip in July. It was actually July 15th. I remember I spent my birthday out there scouting for moose. I remember the podcast episode. We got within 30 yards of 3 moose, And they were, I mean, they were just, it looked like a cow and then a smaller cow and a yearling, and they were huge. And then like when my buddy shot his, oh my gosh, man, the quarters from that were well over 125 pounds each. I mean, you're just
That's
talking.
the thing I never understood. You watch the hunting shows and they're shooting them with bows. I'm like, that's a really big animal to be killing with a compound bow, man.
That's my goal. I want to do it so bad. I put in for it this year, but it didn't work out. I don't know that I'll ever draw a moose tag for Colorado, but my goal is to hunt a Yukon moose up in Alaska with a bow.
Awesome.
But I mean, a lot of guys,
my main goal for this year is turkey hunting. I've never been, and I want to get a turkey. That's on my bucket list this year.
Oh man, if you make it up to Missouri, I've got a spot where, I mean, you'll have to put in some hours, but it could happen opening morning, 15 minutes in.
I'm more than willing to, and that's why I'm actually hoping to get to talk with you about is trying to plan a trip where I can come up there and get some time off and go do a turkey hunt, because that is on my bucket list this year.
We have so many. Just today when I went out fishing, so I brought a bunch of corn out and trail cameras, and I put corn out. I think you have to pull it within like 15 days of the start of season, or it might be 30 now. I don't remember. But because there's no season. Oh, I know. You don't ever have to pull it. You can have the automatic feeders. So I brought corn out and put a couple of cameras up because I know all the fawns are dropping right now. I actually saw 2 fawns run across my driveway on the way out. The doe ran across first and then the 2 fawns. And then on my way home, I saw the doe run back across the driveway, but I didn't stop to see if the fawns were out there. Anyways, I put all this stuff out there and I get out there to the pond. I open the gate. And as soon as I open the gate to go on the property, I look over and there's like 4 turkeys up on the hill. And then I'm sitting there fishing, catch my first fish. It tore apart my worm. And so I put a new worm on. And as I'm doing that, I'm just kind of scanning the fields for coyotes, because I always bring a rifle with to shoot coyotes if I see them. And I look up and there's like a dozen turkeys in the field. And I mean, the spot that we've got for turkey hunting is like nothing I've ever seen.
What's y'all's coyote population like up there?
The worst I've seen it. I mean, aside from like when I was in Phoenix, there were so many coyotes in Phoenix. It was, I mean, like in the middle of subdivisions. But where I'm at, depending on the time of year, I'll have trail cameras out. And if I get 100 pictures on trail camera, I would say 80 to 90 of them will be coyotes.
Jeez. Yeah, we have an abundance of them down here. I took a picture that I took, I don't know, back in March. I was in West Texas and I was leaving a location. I was going down this like 20-mile long rough lease road, and I'm in a semi with a water trailer loaded down. And this coyote pup couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 months old. She was walking across the road and she was real skinny. Looked like she was hungry, and I had some leftover food from lunch. And so I stopped and I got out and I threw it down on the ground, and she came up and I sat there and I watched her eat, and I had my door open. And I was trying to take a picture of her, and she actually walked up to the door and put her front paws up on the steps and like almost let me pet her.
What the heck? That's nuts.
Yeah. I think because there's a lot of people here in Texas that go about it. If you go about it the right way, there's a lot of guys down here that have, they're half-bred coyotes. It makes like a German Shepherd or a German Short-haired Pointer, and a lot of people have them as pets around here. And one of my best friends, he lives over in Floresville. It's 30 minutes outside San Antonio, and he has 2 baby raccoons and a red fox. It's about 7 or 8 months old that he's got as pets. That he's a licensed rehabilitator, because in Texas, if you find a baby deer, you can't just pick it up and keep it as a pet. You have to be a licensed rehabilitator for him. Okay. And if you are, you have to be able to prove it. And so he's a licensed rehabilitator just so he can have them as pets. And he's got, like I said, he's got that red fox. He's got 2 baby raccoons, and it's insane what he's got going on over there.
Oh yeah, I've always thought it would be cool to have a pet deer. I mean, I thought it would be too. I've seen them before. My dad had one growing up. They found a fawn that's mom had been hit by a car, and then when I was probably in middle school, maybe early in high school, the property that I hunt up in Wisconsin, we were visiting with the gentleman that owns it, and he's like, "Hey, have you guys seen the neighbor's pet deer yet?" And I was like, "No, I haven't." And he goes, "Man, you got to come check it out." And we go over there, and sure enough, he's got this deer that he found as a fawn, same type of deal. The mom had been hit by a car, and he just heard it bleeding all night long. I mean, just going nuts. And so he's like, I went out there, found it, scooped it up, started bottle feeding it. And he would go out every morning and just start yelling, Bambi, Bambi. And I'm expecting this deer to just kind of poke its head out and look around. It came as fast as I've ever seen a deer run, came flying out of the woods, ran right up to the bottle. It stopped and looked at me and my brother for a second, like, wait a minute, something's weird. And then it just went to drinking. And he's like, man, you can go out and play with this thing. He's like, run around. It'll play tag with you. It'll try to tackle you. And we did for a while. And he had it until, I can't remember if it was a 6 or an 8-point buck. Someone ended up shooting it.
It sucks.
Yeah. But I mean, in Wisconsin, what do you expect? It's like, unless you can seriously mark it somehow, but like, what do you do? Spray paint the side of it saying like, don't shoot?
Branded or something, I guess.
Yeah.
I know that's what a lot of, like, down here in Texas, there's a lot of people that have high fence ranches out here, obviously, that, they've raised deer, and they're like genetically modified deer. As a matter of fact, the ranch that my uncle used to own, whenever him and his business partner bought that place, the guy that owned it beforehand, he raised deer. And so whenever they bought it, they got all the deer. And they had one, his name was Frankenstein. And I think he was 8 years old, 9 years old at the time. And whenever they got the place, we went out there to go check it out. At that point, he had 62 points on him. I mean,
holy cow.
Nasty. Yeah, it's nasty looking. Once you get past a certain amount of points, they don't look natural anymore. He was huge, but it was crazy because, they kept all the farm raised deer, the genetically modified ones, in the pens. And you could just put corn in your hand and walk up to him. You could pet him, rub on him, he'd love on you. It was crazy.
That's wild. See, like, I'm all about, like, if you're in Texas and you can hunt high fence, like, go for it. But it's when the deer is basically a pet, if you can go and hand feed it, I'm like, at that point, I wouldn't even call it hunting at that point. I just say, like, you're just slaughtering cattle or, some type of. Yeah, exactly. The neighbor's property to my buddy's grandpa's place in Texas, I think he only has like 400 acres, which I say only, that's small for a high fence Texas range. But he's got 400 acres, and the deer on his property, I mean, like, we'll be driving the side by side along the fence, right, and I'll look over, and like you're saying, there'll be a deer with like 30 plus points on it. Yep. I saw a 6-point buck. I kid you not. There was a 6-point buck, and it had to have been 160-inch 6 points. I mean, just huge. It probably had like 18 to 20-inch G1s and 2s. The main beam, the spread on it, the inside spread had to be over 30 inches, but they just, I mean, it's protein and corn, and then they release them after, 3 or 4 years, and then you see them the same spot every day. But I mean, we'd be just on the other side of a high chain link fence from them, and they wouldn't even flinch. They didn't care that we were there at all.
Do y'all have like the 13-inch rule and stuff up here? Because, like, I know here in Texas, there's a lot of the counties in Texas, for a white-tailed deer, for a buck, you have to, like the county I hunted, the inside spread for the antlers has to be 13 inches or greater. Okay. Do y'all have that up there?
No, we don't. I don't know if there's any counties that actually have antler restrictions in Missouri. I know our county doesn't. There's been talk about them introducing antler restrictions. But I know, like, in Colorado, they've got antler restrictions in the unit that I hunt. It's like six inches right on brow tines, or 3 or more points on one side. And so I think it really depends.
The same way. The only way that we can kill anything that's 13 inches or less than 13 inches, it has to be a spike. That's the only option we can kill.
Okay. Is there a good gauge just when, like, looking at a deer through binoculars or seeing one in person? Is it like to midway through the ears?
So it's the way we always done it is if they have their ears out, like your deer behind you on the wall does, if the inside spread, the greatest part of it is outside the ears, you're legal.
Nice.
And that's actually what they taught us in hunter safety education when I was in high school when I took that class.
Okay. Yeah, that's good. I get so, like, weirded out by trying to gauge animals on the hoof, especially like in person. If I see a
Right.
picture of a deer and I can just sit there and study it, I could tell you fairly close how many inches it is. But when you're talking like bighorn rams
Right.
and they're like, it's got to be a full curl, it's got to have this many bands on it. Even when I went out mountain goat hunting, it's like trying to determine a ewe, or not a ewe. Gosh, I can't even think of the different terms for sheep now, or for goats. Anyways, we were trying to figure out if it was a male or female for a while, and it was we had a really hard time determining that. I lost you. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Got you now.
I don't know what happened. I got muted somehow.
Oh, nice.
I said it's like trying to find a hay in a needle stack, huh?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we don't have too many crazy restrictions that I know of, at least in the places I've hunted. I know up in San Angelo, I don't know what county it is. It's northwest Texas, almost central Texas. That's where you really get the mixture of the desert with the hill country. But up there, there's a public hunting land that my stepdad and I used to hunt. And up there, the only way you kill deer is either with a shotgun or a compound bow. That's the only way you can't use a rifle out there.
Yeah. I know Illinois, a good chunk, if not all the state of Illinois is like that. It's a shotgun only. I mean, that wouldn't have been an issue for me growing up. I always hunted with shotguns growing up, shotguns with the slug in it.
I grew up with a rifle. And see, in Texas, you can't use slugs that I know of. It used to be that way. I don't know if you can anymore. If you can now. But
interesting.
I mean, we have before. It's not the right thing to do, but if you're talking, those deer in San Angelo, they get huge out there, but you can't get them. You can't get them close enough to hit them with a buckshot.
Yeah.
You're talking 50 yards. So with a slug, you can reach out there and touch it.
Yeah.
And with the slug, it's almost undetermining when, and it's kind of sad the way we had to do it. At least I remember doing it, and when I was very young, is we had to gut shot them basically. That way, so if you did happen to kill it, 9 times out of 10, if you hit it with a slug in the gut, it's gonna die. And which that's actually one of my favorite parts of the hunt is tracking. I love tracking.
Oh,
and, but it's at that range with a slug, it's not gonna destroy everything like it would at 20 yards.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed when I was down there the body size of deer, because I was at one extreme, being like growing up north, like people, you could shoot a almost 300-inch whitetail deer and it wasn't like, oh my gosh, that's the biggest deer ever. Like there's people who shoot giant deer every year up there, body wise. And then going down to Texas and seeing the deer there, I was like, holy, the antlers all look huge too. Yeah, like the antlers look giant. Like it might look like a 180-inch deer, but it's because the body is so much smaller than what I was used to seeing.
Well, it's like that one that I shot this year. I caught him on game camera, and it's the only time I saw him. I only had one picture of him, and on that picture, he's just huge, beautiful buck. And I said, okay, that's the one I want, because he's coming to my stand. And I hunted every Saturday and Sunday. Saturday morning, Saturday evening, and Sunday morning. We don't hunt Sunday evenings. And we hunted every single weekend. And I saw him one morning. And the way my stand's set up is, where I hunt at, it's all sand. It's just terrible sand. And so my stand sits here, and about 40 yards in front of me is my feeder. But just on the other side of the feeder, it's not really a drop off, but the ground slopes down enough to where if a deer is standing on the other side of the hill, you can't see them.
Yeah.
And so I had this mangy 6-point that would not get away from me. He was staying with me every morning, every evening, and I couldn't shoot him because he wasn't 13 inches. He was pissing me off because he would come in and he'd run all the other deer off because he was an older buck, and he would just eat all the corn. And so one morning, I think it was the day before the last day of deer season, and I was sitting there that morning, and I saw that buck, and I said, man, all right, I was sitting there, I'm half deaf, so I can't hear shit anyways. And so I'm sitting there in that stand, it's just barely getting daylight, and it's perfect shooting hour. And I have the damn 6 points there again. and there's a doe off to his right. And I'm like, I don't want to kill a doe. And if I have to, I will, just to get the meat. And then I could hear this crunch. Man, neither one of those deer are moving. I was looking both sides of my stand in front of me. What the hell is that, And so finally I spun my chair around and I popped up in my back window. Well, back behind me is an open field, and it's got like a divot in it, and it goes back up. There's a pond over here, and then on the other side of that pond, it's some trees. It's my dad's stand, and it's about 400 yards across total. Well, down in that little divot, there's two big giant oak trees. Man, they got to be 200 plus years old, easy. And they're real low hanging, and they got the moss that hangs off of them. Well, that's where all the deer bed at, because it's perfect cover.
Yeah.
Well, I hear something. I'm looking, and finally there comes that buck. I'm like, well, I can't shoot him that way because my dad stands over there. My dad's in there. Otherwise, I would.
Yeah.
And so I'm waiting. Well, he makes his way over to the old road that we used to use to get in there. Now we have a new road. And he hits the road and he starts heading towards the feeder. I'm like, perfect. He's going to make it to the feeder. I'm going to get him. I just got to wait. Sorry. So I close my back window real easy, spin my chair around. And I make sure I got a round loaded. And I wait. And I can hear him walking and watching and hearing him. And then he goes on the other side of this tree, and I never saw him again. And I was so angry. I was like, are you kidding me? So we got out of the stand that morning. Neither one of us got anything. I had to work that day. I had to go, the boss was coming in, so I had to clean all the trucks up. And so I had to haul out to town, to clean all the trucks up. And I made it back to the house just in time, because my wife and my daughter and I were living with my dad at the time. And I made it back to the house just in time. Well, we like to be in the stand no later than 3:45, 4 o'clock at the latest in the evening hunts.
Yeah.
And I made it back just in time. I crawled in the stand at 4:45, 5:15. That buck was dead on the ground. It was loading up in the truck and going home.
Oh, that's awesome.
It was, man, I'm pretty sure, because that was the first deer I killed since 2016. And I'm pretty sure my dad, 400 yards across the pasture, heard me hooping and hollering and screaming.
Oh, I bet. Man, there's something about like seeing a deer before you actually are able to shoot it. Like if you can have some history with it, even this elk that I shot, my first elk that I shot, it wasn't like I had seen it days before, or even the day before, but we saw it from like 700 yards away. And it was like the most picturesque thing. There was a whole herd of cows out there, and this thing was standing on like a bluff, just like looking out over this valley. And we were like, all right, yeah, we're going to go after it. And so we went out after it, and the whole hunt was kind of crazy. Like we spooked a different herd, was spooked that herd. Anyways, they ended up coming back up the mountain towards us. And I ended up shooting that same bull. But I'm like, there's something about like seeing it and like getting excited about it. And then, maybe the opportunity slips through your fingers and you get another chance later. Yeah. I would much rather that than just like a totally random, like never seen this deer before, didn't know this thing was alive. And all of a sudden I get 5 seconds to enjoy looking at it.
Yeah. That's why I enjoy game cameras so much, because I get the joy of getting to look at all the deer that come to the feeder, and I get to be like, okay, I want this one if I can get a chance, but if not, I'm going to take that one. You got, because we have some really, I hunt in Cuero, which is DeWitt County in Texas. And for being a tiny little town, I think there's maybe 2,600 people live in this town. And in fact, like 5 miles down the road from the lease, there's a state prison there. And, but for a very heavily trafficked road, because the way it is, we hunt both. You got the road that splits the property, and we got, I think it's 20 acres on the left side, which is where my dad and I hunt. And then we got 32 acres on the right side, which is where my former stepmom, her 2 brothers have stands over there. And so my dad and I have been hunting the left side for the last, 6 years, 7 years now. And, we got some really big deer that come out of there. I know not this past year, but the season before last, my grandfather, my dad took him out there, and he killed a really nice buck. He was an 8 point. And he scored like 162, just coming off of a wild being corn fed.
Oh man, I've never killed a 162-inch deer. That's awesome.
Well, see, that's another thing is, my uncle, the one that owned that high fence ranch, he owns a printing company in Houston, actually, the Astro.
You there? Sorry.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I done got kicked off again. anyways, the Houston Astros, they have these huge banners on the side of their stadium. It's got the pictures of the baseball players and their stats and their ranking. Well, my uncle owns a company that makes those banners.
Oh, cool.
And so, he's rolling in the cash. Well, every year he goes to Africa and he goes and he hunts whatever it is that he hunts over there. But also every year, he hasn't done it the last 2 years. My grandfather's been dealing with a rare form of leukemia for the last couple of years.
Oh, man.
And but they go down to Argentina. There's a place called Argentina Wild Wings. And they go dove hunting down there. And there's like no limit, no season, because they're insane. I mean, I've got pictures of my grandfather sitting where they're standing on the ground and there's piles of dove. They're 5-6 foot tall. All the doves they've shot,
Man, that is a dream hunt for me. I want to go to Argentina and do a combination waterfowl and dove hunt.
Yes.
I watched the world record. Oh yeah. I watched the world record for most doves taken in one day. And I don't remember what it was. It was around 10,000 in one day by one person. And he had a team of like 4 people that were just reloading shotguns for him. And they were just like, he would get a new shotgun, boom, boom, new shotgun, boom, boom, all day long. I'm like, I don't want to kill 10,000 doves, but I'd love to go down there and just have. I can't imagine. Oh, it had to have been, because he wasn't even shooting semi-autos. He was shooting over-unders. And
see, I think at that point, I'd probably use a 20 gauge, maybe even a 410, just to ease it up on my shoulder.
Oh, yeah. I'd use a semi-auto 410. You wouldn't feel the recoil. I mean, after 10,000, with the way that I shoot, it would be more like 30,000 shots in order to get 10,000 doves. But I mean, he was just leveling them one after the next. But the waterfowl down there, oh man,
it's amazing. I'm kind of like you, man. There's some days we go duck hunting or we'll go dove hunting, like every single shot I'm taking something. And there's some days I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn if I was standing right in front of it.
Oh yeah, I was just talking to my buddy Chris the other day, because when we go out dove hunting, I'll bring so many rounds out, because it's like you're just shooting at everything. And sometimes it's like a sky blast. Sometimes they're right in your face, but like the direction they're flying, the height they're flying, everything's changing every time you shoot. Well, he was like, dude, I'm bringing 1 box of ammo out. And I think the limit here, I can't remember if it's 15 or 16 doves, but he's like,
more than us. We have a limit of 10.
Oh, dang. See, when I was out in Colorado, you could hunt Eurasian doves out there because they're invasive, non-natives. And so there's no limit and no season. And so I could hunt doves all year long out there. But anyways, so here it's like 15 or 16. And he's like, I'm bringing 1 25 count box of ammo. And he did. And he shot 18, or I think he said he shot 18 rounds and had his limit. Wow. And then he's like, the next time I went out, I did the same thing. I brought 1 box, and he's like, I finished off the box and had like 6 birds on the ground. And he's like, he's like, I just couldn't do it. And then he ran out of ammo, and my buddy Tony was with him, and he had already limited it out. And so he switched shotguns with him because Tony had 20 gauge ammo. And so then he's like, and then I shot, and he's like, even finishing off all of Tony's rounds, I still didn't get my full limit of doves.
Oh, it's like that sometimes, man. It really is.
Oh yeah, I've had times where I've had geese in my face. I mean, like locked up, back flapping at 5 feet off my barrel, and I pull the trigger and they fly away, and I don't have any idea how it works.
What the hell just happened?
Yeah, and then there's other times, like I had a shot on a dove one time. It flew in, I shot it, it dropped, hit the ground, and took off again, and it was flying away from me. And I paced it off, but I knew I had hit it because there were feathers and it hit the ground. And then all of a sudden it flew off again. And I was like, all right, I got to put this thing down. And I think my second shot had to have been, I think I paced it off at 67 paces from where I shot to where I picked the dove up. And I'm like, I don't even know how that's possible. How do I miss at 5 feet and hit it at almost 70 yards?
Yeah, I know a couple years ago, before we lost my duck dog, Diesel, we actually had to stop using him during dove hunting because he would go out and retrieve them. We would have customers. I mean, like lots of customers for our guide service. And this particular day, I think we had 20 guys hunting with us. And I ended up having to take him back to the truck and putting him in the kennel because he would go out and retrieve him and he'd bring him back. And then while we were hunting, we'd look over and he'd be eating him.
Oh no.
Yeah. He was a damn good duck dog though, man.
Yeah, that's no good. You can't have them eating doves.
Yeah,
I had a dog.
It's insane.
I had a dog that did that once. I caught him doing it one time, and that's the only time I've ever known about him doing it. But he was a good dog.
Diesel, it was insane, man. At that time, he was probably 6 years old at the time. And at 6 years old, 5 to 6 years old, in his prime, he was an American black chocolate lab. And so he had the big square head in his prime.
Yeah.
He weighed 152 pounds.
Holy cow.
Huge. He was huge. I mean, his paw prints were bigger around. I mean, this is big around for a chocolate lab, you know?
That's insane.
And I remember when we got him, he was a Valentine's Day present for me because my birthday is January 14th. And we had actually the same birthday. And I got him. My mom and stepdad paid for him on Valentine's Day, and I got him in March, the following month, because, you know, he was still real young.
Yeah.
And I had him at the house for about 2 weeks. And at the time, I was living with my dad, and I was going to my mom and stepdad every other weekend. And so that was my Christmas present from them. But then my birthday present from them was I actually paid for him to go to school. And so we took him to that school. He was 2 months old, 3 months old. And I didn't see him for a whole year. And then, you know, so he went from being, you know, this big to when I got him back at a year and a half old, he was almost, you know, the top of his head was standing at the bottom of my chest.
Holy cow.
I remember the first time we took him duck hunting. It was a great hunt. We were hunting Choke Canyon, and we were like 3 or 4 birds shy of the 2-man limit. And I shot one. Well, the duck didn't die. It happens, you know, they don't always die as soon as you shoot them. Well, he's swimming out there to go get him, and he grabs that duck by the body, and that duck turned around and pecked him in the eye. And he dropped him, and we couldn't get him to get in the boat for like 6 or 7 weeks. He would not go hunting.
I've heard of that same thing happening. I read an article in Outdoor Magazine years ago, and this guy had spent all this money. I mean, between the price of the dog and then the training for the dog, he had like $13,000 into this dog. And I mean, it was doing field trials and all this different stuff. Well, he took it out on one of the first goose hunts, and same thing. He winged a goose. The dog ran out, picked the goose up. The goose turned and pecked it in the eye, and he said he never hunted the dog again. The dog just wouldn't hop in the boat wouldn't hop in the truck. If he had camo on, the dog wanted nothing to do with it. And I'm like, geez, can you imagine?
He knew what was happening.
But I see a lot of guys now, they buy those goggles for their dogs. That's becoming a much more common thing. They're putting those on. Hey, so being in Texas, you guys can hunt sandhill cranes down there, right?
Yes. So I actually found this out the hard way a couple of years ago. Back in 2016, I was sitting in my deer stand. It was a Saturday afternoon, beautiful day, and I hadn't seen a deer all day long. And I had a couple of sandhill cranes land at my feeder, and they were eating at the corn. And I knew. I looked it up real quick, saw it was sandhill cranes. Okay, boom, squeezed off around, dropped the biggest one. Throw him in the back of the truck. About 30 minutes later, my dad kills himself a deer. So we load his deer up. We're heading back to the house, and the game warden pulled us over because they see feathers flying out of the back of the truck.
Yeah.
And luckily, that game warden was very nice, and he did not give me a citation. He just gave me a verbal warning or a written warning. But I found out the hard way, you can't kill him with deer rifle. Oh,
I was gonna say, I was thinking, like, as you were telling the story, that it had to do with being over bait, because I know you can't hunt migratory birds over any type of bait unless it's a crop field.
So yes and no. I don't know if you can't. I've only ever hunted sandhill crane one other time, and it was over the water. So I can't tell you that. Actually, I don't know if I'd say I'm on my phone. I'd close real quick and go to my Outdoor Annual app, because there's an app. It's the Texas Outdoor Annual. It's the Texas Parks and Wildlife Department app. They run, and it's got, you click whatever county you're in, and it'll tell you all the rules and regulations. And it's basically like the little hunter's edge, the hunter book you get whenever you buy a hunting license. I don't know if you can hunt them over bait or not. I've only ever I see them out in the fields all the time, going again cornfields and eating all the corn, but I've only ever hunted them one other time.
Yeah, I think with, I mean, I don't know if it's the same with sandhills, but with migratory birds, you can hunt them over planted crops, but you
Yeah.
can't hunt them over, I don't know how the phrasing is, but basically you can't hand distribute feed. It
Right.
has to be naturally fallen crops
Yeah.
or grain in order to hunt over. And so you can hunt them over rice fields and corn fields and bean fields and all that stuff,
Right. Yeah.
as long as you didn't go out and just spread corn for the
Yeah.
purpose of feeding ducks.
Exactly. See, I know. I think it was a couple of years ago. They finally, I think they changed. I want to say they changed it. I could be wrong, but where we could spread Milo out for dove now.
Oh, nice.
And yeah, but I mean that's where like down in South Texas where we dove on that. Generally, 9 times out of 10, we'll start it earlier in the year. We'll plant Milo out there on purpose, and
Yeah.
just, go out there and spread seed. If it grows, it grows. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But we got a pond that we hunt off of where we always have Milo and sunflowers on the backside of it. And we'll sit under a tree and just wait for them to come over the pond.
Nice. Yeah, the place that we dove hunt, it's conservation land, and there's hundreds of people that go out there opening morning, but they have sunflower fields. No plant, acres and acres of sunflower, and then they just burn it, and the doves come in and tear it up.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about burning the sunflower fields, but good Lord, they love it.
Yeah.
I actually had the opportunity 2 years ago to dove hunt, and I got a banded dove. That was pretty cool.
That's awesome. So you're one of the only 2 people that I know aside from myself who has a banded dove. I shot.
Really?
Yeah, I've got. They're
sorry. It's had an 18 wheeler just drive by me, and he's pulling in his parking. He had his brakes locked up on the trailer.
Oh dang. We had this guy come out hunting with us from work, and it was his first time ever dove hunting, and he had this short barreled like turkey shotgun with him, and that's what he was hunting with. And he ended up shooting a dove, and it was banded, and that was the first time I had ever heard or seen of a banded dove.
Yeah,
and
they're so hard to come across.
Oh yeah. And then I think it was the following year, I was sitting with my dog out on the property that I was just at today, and there was a big dead tree, and I knew the doves loved to land in there. And so I'm sitting underneath the tree next to it, just waiting for doves to come in. Didn't have any decoys out or anything. And all of a sudden these 2 came in, landed on the branches right in front of me. And so I slowly lifted my gun up, because they came from the opposite side of the tree. And so I didn't have a chance to shoot at them until they were landed. And so I just picked out the one on the right and pulled the trigger. It dropped. And then I went to shoot the one on the left, but it flew out the same way it came in on the other side of the tree. So I didn't pull the trigger, and my dog runs and gets it, and I wring its neck, and I look down, and it's got a band, and I lost my mind. I mean, that was the first banded bird I'd ever killed. And then 2 years later, I was in Colorado.
It's really hard to explain that to people, because they're like, what's so special? I'm like, you get to see where this bird has been. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, then the next year or 2 years later, I think it was, I shot another banded dove out in Colorado. The only problem with my doves that I shot were both of them were banded within 30 days of me shooting them, and within 5 miles of where I shot them.
Of course. The one, when I looked mine up, it was banded. I want to say it was banded in Georgia, and it had actually made its way all the way up to Canada, and then down into Mexico, and then back into Texas.
Jeez, that's crazy.
I think it was 4 or 5 years old. I'm like, wow, I kind of feel bad for killing you now.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. I hope to one day shoot something that's banded or even collared. Like out in Colorado, if you come across an elk or a mule deer or a bear that's collared, they still are fine with you shooting it. You just have to report that it had a collar, and you have to return the collar. But I've got a buddy who shot a 211-inch mule deer that had a collar on it. And he got it mounted, but he had to return the collar. So he went on eBay and bought a replica collar and put it on the mount.
There you go. That works. Yeah, my stepdad, he grew up in Northeast Texas, up around Texarkana, Linden area. And, he grew up, he's the one that sparked my passion for duck hunting. I had never even thought about duck hunting before I met him. And, man, my first duck hunt he ever took me on, I didn't have any waders. All I had was some knee-high waterproof boots, some faux camo pants, and a camo t-shirt. And so, I was all black painted up on my arms and my face. And I was out there. We were hunting Corpus Christi Bay or Aransas Bay, one or the other. And I shot my first duck. And I ran out there to go get it because at the time we didn't have a duck dog. And I mean, as soon as I stepped, I was 3 foot in the water. I went straight up to my chest.
Oh,
and
man.
I had to swim over there. To get this duck. And I got it. And I don't know what it was about that hunt, but I was insanely hooked. But you know, he grew up in Northeast Texas, and they get mallards. Down in South Texas, it's very few and far between you see mallards or wood ducks. But he has 2 lanyards for his duck calls, and both of them are completely full up with bands, like all the way around. For how many banded ducks he shot growing up there. So to him, it's nothing. You know, he shoots a banded duck. He's like, oh, cool, another one I can put on my lanyard. But for me, I've never killed one, and I'm like, that's the life goal right there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would love to have that. I've got a buddy. I used to live in his basement, actually, or in his parents' basement. When I was in college, they offered me a cheap place to live, or actually a free place to live. And so
there you go.
I was living with him, and we both were into duck hunting, and he had a lanyard, and it came with say it was a banded lanyard. It just had a band that said banded on it, you know, from the factory.
Yeah.
Well, he's like, man, I wonder if I can just buy bands. And I was like, oh, I'm sure you can. He hopped on Amazon, or not Amazon, on eBay, and he bought like a whole bag. I mean, a full bag of bands. And then he clipped them all on his lanyard. And I remember he was trying to convince one of his friends that he had shot all those birds. And I called him out on it like right away as I heard him talking. And he's like, dude, come on, man. I was trying to mess with him. I'm like, dude, you cannot go on eBay and buy a bunch of bands and then try to pass it off as you're like the world's greatest waterfowl hunter.
I have one of those. I don't know if you've ever seen it. I bought it on Amazon a couple of years ago, actually. It's a little mini goose call necklace. It's got the cinched up rope on it.
Yep.
I bought it on Amazon. I didn't realize it, but then I got it, and it has 2 faux plastic bands in there, but it's made by Duck Commander, and it's an actual functioning goose call, which is really cool.
That's awesome. That's really sweet.
I'm waiting on it. I've been trying to. I'm not hurting for the cash. I've just been trying to scrape, slowly through save the cash up. But there's a guy, Montana, Minnesota, somewhere up in the northeastern region of the U.S. that he makes handmade duck calls. But with my duck dog, when we had to put him down back in 2019, we had him cremated, and so he actually makes handmade duck calls that he incorporates and puts the ashes of your whatever, your dad, your brother, your dog, whatever. And he'll actually put the ashes inside the duck call.
Dang.
And it's like $2,800. So, it's not something I just want to go, okay, here's my credit card. I want to,
oh yeah.
I'm slowly but surely saving up because I thought, if I could do that, that would be really, really, really cool to do that.
Dude, that is sweet. I've never spent a lot of money on duck calls at all.
I love Duck Commander calls. They're the best, honestly.
Oh yeah. Well, I had a guy on the podcast just the other day. I don't think his episode has aired yet, but his name is Sean Trump, and he's out of Pennsylvania. And he makes his own, or he makes custom duck calls. And so I was talking to him. He's got a triple reed call that he makes. He said it's his #1 seller. You'll have to look him up. He's his company's North T Outfitters or Northern Timber Outfitters.
I'll have to look that up. Triple reed sounds like something I could get along with.
Oh yeah. Well, I was talking to him and I was like, man, my mom makes antler rings. So she'll make like a band out of like a deer antler. And I was like,
that's awesome.
If I got a hold of an elk antler, could you put that like as part of the duck call? And he messaged me the day after we were on the podcast, and he's like, hey man, I got my hands on an elk antler, and I'm gonna make you a triple reed with an elk antler band and send it to you. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is sweet, because I've never had like a custom duck call before. It's all been like, I just buy it at the store.
I have one custom duck call that I've never touched, and I probably never will touch. But it was my stepdad, but he gave it to me. But it was he got it custom made. Man, I think I was probably 15 or 16, and he got it custom made for me for Christmas one year. I mean, it's
Yeah.
real pretty blue wood grain, hand carved. It sounds amazing, but I'm so scared because I have the original style duck commander duck call, the old school wooden one.
Yeah.
And it's not the original one, but it's the same duck call. And man, you know how rotted that thing is because of all the water and salt water it's seen.
Yep.
I can't go duck hunting. Every time I go duck hunting, even if I'm going to go right back out that afternoon, I have to break my shotgun down and clean it because my poor shotgun, that thing's probably been dropped in the water, stepped on. It's got all kind of abuse to it.
Man, I love a good shotgun that you can just beat the tar out of though. Like
Benelli Supernova.
Yeah. See, I've had shotguns all my life, and like here especially, you'll get super muddy water, but then you also get like ice in some of the spots that we hunt. The ice isn't thick enough to walk across, so you've got to bust it out. And so we'll be like waist deep and just beating the butt of our shotgun, like taking chunks out, pushing ice underneath, and then you got to clear a hole for the birds to land in. And so all of my shotguns, I tell my friends and my wife all the time, like, I will never have a bow, rifle, or shotgun that I'm afraid to scratch.
That hasn't been abused, trust me. That's actually the number one thing that's keeping me from spending the money on a Benelli Supernova. Because I mean, there's a place in College Station, which is Texas A&M. It's called Champion Firearms, and if you go on their website and look at the Benelli Supernova, it actually says our everyday low price is lower than the allowed advertised price. Please call for a quote. And I'm talking, you can walk in there and buy that shotgun $350 out the door for a Benelli. Yeah,
that's awesome.
It's not a whole lot of money, but I just for the name, you know, I'm like, I don't really feel like spending the money on that name and just abusing it.
Yeah. See, we had guys.
My current shotgun, I have the 870 Super Mag, just chambered for 3.5, because I like to use 3.5 when I goose hunt. And I mean, that's just a wood grain stock. I spray painted it black, and I have a little trick that I do to make a gun look camo. Is I spray paint it black, and then I get weesatch sleeves, or a lot of times I use the blade grass if you find out by the lake and whatnot. And I'll lay it on there and I just spray over it with like the camo spray paint, and then let it dry. And by the time I'm done, it looks, you know, like bladed grass camo.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I just did that with that one. I mean, that poor gun, it's only like 4 years old, and it looks like it's about 20 years old. It's rusted out. It barely shoots anymore.
The pits that we hunted in Colorado, I don't know if you guys pit hunt there. Is that what you guys do, or do you guys do like layout blinds? Okay. So the pits out in Colorado that we hunted.
Sometimes we do pit hunt. Sometimes we do layout blinds. A lot of times we don't even actually purposely goose hunt. I know a couple of years ago was probably the best I found in my life. It froze the night before. It was a Saturday morning. We got up at 3 o'clock. It was an hour drive to our spot, but on the lake, we had this cove on the lake, but we didn't ever pay attention. We were always hunting in the afternoons. But we decided to go out that morning because it was frozen, and we figured by the time the sun came out, all the birds would come flying. And sure enough, we get into that cove, and as soon as the sun comes up, the sky went black, because it turns out, and all the trees behind us was a goose and sandhill crane roost back there.
Oh,
and so
man.
when the sun came out, they just took off. Oh, I'm telling you, 10 minutes after sunrise, we were limited out on everything. It was insane.
That is awesome. See, we would pit hunt this field in Colorado, and it was like in the middle of the city basically, but it was technically we could hunt it, but it was just a pit. And so they brought a backhoe out and dug out the pit. And so when you're sitting down in it, all it is a dirt box basically, and then it's got a piece of plywood with lids on top of it so that you can pop out. Well, we had every type of gun out there. I mean, we had dudes with TriStars, with Remingtons, with Stogers, with Benelli, like Super Black Eagle 3s. I mean, everything. But there is just so much dirt flying around in there that it's like nobody was free of jams. Like just chunks of dirt. You go to throw the lid back because the whole plywood on top of you is covered in dirt, and then corn stalks, you know, to brush it in. And so it's like every time you flip the lid back, you're popping your gun out. As you're flipping the lid back, you're getting rained down on. Like I'd shake my jacket or my shirt out, and it would just be like pouring out chunks of dirt. and everyone's like freaking out. You know, they've got their brand new Benellis out there, and I'm sitting there with a Stoger, and I'm just like, dude, this thing has been abused way more than any gun I've ever had.
Yeah, I have that before I had the 870 Super Mag, I just had the 870 Express, and I still have that thing. Well, actually, I traded my stepdad a bow for it a couple years ago, and but that thing, it got the wood stock, but I painted it black and camo, just like I do with every other shotgun I have that I haven't bought that I have that wasn't camo. And there's literal, looks like somebody took a pocket knife and just dug into that wood stock. It's all beat up and chewed up. The barrel looks like somebody took a grinder to it. It's messed up. But
Man,
hands down, probably one of the best shotguns I've ever had.
dude, I had a super nice rifle that it was one of the nicer rifles I've ever owned. It was a Montana Rifle Company 338 Win Mag, and I got it for elk hunting. When I knew I was moving out to Colorado, I picked it up.
Right.
And I brought it out, and like anytime I would transport it, I don't know why, I've always been in the habit of just taking the bolt out, and then I'd put the bolt behind the stock, or like behind the butt of the gun in the case.
Right.
And so we get out there, and it was like opening day. We hop on the four-wheelers. We've got our cases like strapped to the back of the four-wheeler because you have to have a hard case when you're driving around. And we go to open the case up as we got out to hike, and my bolt had rattled from how long we were on the four-wheelers and hitting bumps and stuff.
Oh, no.
It had rattled all the way up, chipped the entire cheek piece on the rifle.
Oh,
the receiver for the bolt was all beat up. I mean, it was like Cerakoted, like black, but it was just metal on metal, just like repeatedly just vibrating and hitting it over and over. I chipped everything up on that gun, and I never did get that bolt to go back in like as smooth as it had before. But I ended up trading the gun for a bow, and I still have the bow, and I shoot it all the time. So it served its purpose. I got one elk with it.
I haven't bow hunted since high school, and there's a reason behind that. Is my dad got his first bow I know of when I was probably 6 or 7, and then when I was 8, a couple of years before my parents divorced, my dad bought me a bow for Christmas because I wanted to get into it. And I practiced every single day. I mean, every day after school, I was out there in the yard shooting. And I got to the point where at 9 years old, at the max at that time, back then you couldn't shoot a deer unless you had a 35 pound draw weight or over. And I don't know if they've changed that or not, but I had this little, I don't remember what kind of bow it was. I want to say it was a Parker, and it was a youth bow, and my dad had it cranked all the way up. It was sitting at 42 pounds, and at 9 years old, I was grouping at 30 yards, tight as real tight. And I practiced and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced. And then my sophomore year in high school, where we lived at the time, I was living with my mom and stepdad then. We had their place. My stepdad had 20 acres there, but then the property next door was like 160 acres. Well, the guy that ran his cows on it, he worked for Devon Energy. Well, he leased it from Devon Energy for his cows. Well, he told us, you can hunt out there, just don't kill my cows. Take care of the place, don't tear it up. So a 40-yard walk from the house across the fence through the trees, I had a tree stand set up with a deer feeder, and it was probably 10 yards from the stand to the feeder. And I had this 12 point that I caught on game camera. And I mean, he was huge. And I hunted every single afternoon after school, after football practice. I was out there. I was in that blind. And finally, one afternoon, he finally comes out. Well, my stepdad had one of his customers from the company he worked for. He brought him hunting. He'd never killed a javelina. We had a huge javelina problem out there. So, for whatever reason, for 40 yards shooting, this dude brought a freaking 338 Lapua to shoot a javelina. And so, from my stand to that stand, it's like 250 yards straight across the brush, but you could shoot a 338 through there. You're not going to hit me through that too. I mean, it's just thick brush,
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there playing on my phone, as a teenager would. And I look up and that 12 point standing underneath the feeder eating corn. I was like, oh, finally, I still to this day have not killed anything with a bow. So I slowly stand up and I draw back. And at this time, I actually had a different bow and I was sitting at 56 pounds. And I drew back and I was sitting there in my release. I lined up my sights and I was just about to pull the trigger when the guy that was hunting with my stepdad pulled the trigger on that giant 338. And I never got a shot off that deer, and it broke my heart. That's why I quit bow hunting for a long time. I wanted to get back into it because just 2 days later, it was on the weekend, and my mom and I were going into town. My stepdad and I were going into town, and there was a dead deer on the side of the road. It was a damn 12 point. Somebody hit it with a car. And I swore it off for years. And I was just talking to my wife Amanda the other day, and I told her, I was like, I've got my eyes set on the new Hoyt, and I think it's like $1,300 for it, but it's the perfect bow I've ever seen in my life. And I really, truly want to get it just because I want to get back into bow hunting again. Yeah. I missed the thrill of it.
Man, I love it. And I love just being able to go out and shoot every day. Like now with not being able to find any ammo, like I can't just go out and shoot my rifle all the time. Yeah, but to just get out and shoot arrows all the time, that's one of my favorite things to do.
Yep.
Well, hey man, we're coming up on time here.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed talking. I feel like I could talk to you for another 5 hours, but I've actually got a 4-wheeler that I've got to go repair. I've got 2 buddies meeting over at my friend's house. The guy whose property we rent, he was like, he knew I was going out to Colorado this fall and I'm looking for a 4-wheeler or a side-by-side to use. And he's like, hey man, you can take my 4-wheeler out if you want to mess with it a little bit. So we went and loaded it up, cleaned the carb out on it, but I picked up a spark plug and I've got a air intake hose that I've got to replace on it. And so I'm about to go meet them. But I want to give you a chance real quick for anybody listening that wants to follow what you do, what you're into, your journey in the outdoors. How can they follow you on social media?
Right now, I just have my Facebook. I have a TikTok, but I can't remember the name of my TikTok. I don't have like 3 videos, but I have a YouTube channel that I'm working on trying to get some more content. I've only got 1 video, but it's Metex Wildlife. It's all capitalized for Metex. It's Netex. And then wildlife. Find me, you can subscribe there. I've only got 1 video, like I said, but I'm working on trying to get some more content out for anybody who wants to watch.
Nice. And then one last thing, I'm going to give you a final word. I call this segment emptying the chamber. So if there's anything you want to leave the listeners with, here's your chance.
Well, just get out there, take chances. A lot of people I know that I meet all over the country where I'm traveling to for work, I ask them, I talk to people, you hunt, you fish? Oh, I don't know, man. I have time. I just don't know if I want to do, take the chance. There's so many people that are scared of grasshopper, put some bug spray on, get out there and enjoy the outdoors. God didn't create this for us to just live on it. He created us for us to enjoy it. And I think that's what I'd like to leave people with is, get out there and enjoy life. Don't let the hustle and bustle of everyday life get you down, because before you know it, you're going to be on your deathbed and you're going to regret not having fun. Absolutely. Well, man, I really appreciate you taking the time. I'm glad we were able to finally make this happen. Yes. And we're going to have to stay in, 3rd time, but we're going to have to stay in touch and get you up here on a turkey hunt next year. Heck yeah. All right. Thanks a lot, man.